Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
And welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism, folks. Here for the main show. Been a week since we had a wee chat. Lots and lots going on since then, including our wee trip to Coatbridge, which I'll talk about when my guests join me. So let's not waste any more time. Let's not hang about. I've got joining me today my two wonderful friends, Yvonne Ridley and Eva Comrie. Ladies, long time no see. Welcome. Nice to see you. I should say, ladies and gentlemen, that Phil is hopefully on his way. He's had some transport difficulties, but hopefully he'll be with us shortly. But if not, I'm sure my two Leonard friends here will be able to carry this show, no bother. So, Eva, how did you enjoy Coatbridge?
Oh, it was absolutely fantastic, Roddy. Not only did I enjoy every minute of it, I learned last night we were in Dalkeith for a wee Alba book event, and several of the people in the audience had been great fans at Prism. And one guy in particular, I'm going to say hello to. Hi, Andrew, and hi to your brother Alec. They watch every week with bated breath and are looking very much forward to seeing both parts of the Coatbridge event. They're great fans, actually are. Most folk that we meet at Wee Alba events are talking very, very highly of yourself, Roddy, and what you're doing here in Prism. So all good stuff, highly topical.
Good. And you, I know you had a good time, everyone. I know you did.
Oh, it was absolutely fantastic. I mean, Eva was on fire, so was Sarah. Tommy, was brilliant as usual. And Phil, we had a happy Phil. The angry Phil was left overseas, I think, and it was just an amazing event and very heartwarming as well to know that the spirit of independence is alive and well and beating very strong. And it was great. When I got back that night, I was switched on the TV for more sort of moribund reporting about the funeral. And I just didn't recognise the Britain that the royal observers were talking about to what I had just left. It was, it was two countries, a tale of two countries.
It was absolutely marvelous, and it was the bit that's really also special is to meet people who you see, who send you comments, who we know watch the show, and for that to meet them, it was really fabulous to meet some of the people who watch us every week. I should just say before we go any further, part two techie, there's been some technical stuff of syncing, etc. It's been a real bind for poor old techie in between his own work and his family commitments, etc. But he's got it all just about ready. We're going to put out the second part on Wednesday. It'll go out early in the morning, hopefully. And so you'll have part two of Coatbridge as our midweek special. But as you alluded to, Yvonne, we buried the Queen and got the new King, and and it's business as usual. But so many other things happening. I mean, I don't know if you saw the article in the Spectator, where there were suggestions that they should possibly try and have the Queen made into a saint. Did you? I mean,
I'm not sure what the Catholic definition of a saint is, and I certainly don't know the Protestant definition. But doesn't it involve performing some sort of miracle?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a miracle she managed to stay in the throne for so long. But
well,
I didn't know. I don't know if the Anglican Church can do it or not.
That she kept Prince Andrew out of court.
Jail. Yeah, it's. But I mean, they go over the top. They went way over. I actually think that they overdid it. They overcooked it.
Yeah. I mean, you know, she was a good woman, and
No doubt.
you know, and as a mother, she instinctively, you know, protected her own. So I don't suppose that we can really criticize her for defending Prince Andrew. But you know, it's people have paid their respects, and it's time to move on now.
Yeah. You glad it's all over, Eva?
I'm absolutely delighted it's over, but you know, it's going to be like 1966, isn't it? We're going to hear over and over and over again about what a wonderful lady she was. I'd be wonderful too if I was born into privilege and had jewellery worth millions, if no billions of pounds. She never wanted for a damn thing for her whole entire life. So she might have been a really nice person, she might have had a lot of good stuff going for her, but we need to get a bit of perspective in this United Kingdom. You know, we spoke about it last week. The headline in the Sunday Herald, the top half of the page was about hunger, starvation, and the malnutrition of children in Scotland. 4,000 Scottish kids in hospital with malnutrition in the last few years, on the one hand, and on the other. Suddenly, there was indeed a magic money tree from which we could magic up the funds for all those uniforms and suits and boots, and putting up, you know, the dignitaries from across the world that descended on the UK. We had multiple ceremonies. We had ceremonies in Edinburgh, we had events in Northern Ireland, we had events in Wales. I do not know how many services there were in the Westminster area for the Queen. You know, most folk have one funeral. You have a service, and then you might have a committal, and that's your lot. This lady had, you know, numerous events to mark her passing, and you know that's going to continue. It's way, way over the top, completely lost all sense of perspective or decency, and I think actually risks at times making a laughing stock of the whole damn thing, because it did turn into a circus. I don't, how many times did you see Charles and his brothers and sisters and children walking behind the coffin? I mean, you saw it in Edinburgh, you saw it several times down in London. They must have been absolutely sick to the back teeth, as well as being, you know, upset having been bereaved, having to go through this charade. Just ridiculous, really.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I mean, I wonder if President Biden got steak pie. A lot of steak pie was. So yeah, and we'll go through all this nonsense again. When the coronation comes, but anyway, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But it was a hell of a week in other ways, Yvonne, because I suppose I've got to say the big event, in inverted commas, was this, and I'm loath to call it a budget. It was I don't know, Enrich Your Pals Day by Quasi, and our pal Phil, and I hope he does make it through. Phil warned us what Quasi was like, but it was nothing short of an abomination, his statement yesterday, transferring more wealth from the poor to the rich.
Well, you know, it's it's not as though the very rich or the filthy rich in Britain don't have enough money. What? Giving away 2 billion to the richest people in the country? Really? It was madness. And in fact, you know, somebody alluded to it earlier that it's as though there's a mafia running the country. And, you know, Liz Truss and her cabal are more like the Flaming Sopranos. They're just, this mini budget, which is supposed to benefit, I think it was 600,000 people who will benefit, all of, you know, are earning more than £150,000 a year. They will benefit by about 10 grand. And that's just the average. The more they earn, the bigger the tax cut. So 600,000 are laughing all the way to the bank.
The bank in the Panama, well, you know, not in the high street. If I saw someone worked out the figure, if you earn £1 million or more, then you get 55 grand extra a year, which is twice the median income. Eva, it's an obscenity.
Of course it is, and it's obscenity that we shouldn't have been part of if any of the mandates delivered repeatedly since 2014-15 had been acted on. As it is, it's a reverse Robin Hood, robbing for the poor and giving to the rich. Utterly ridiculous. You know, magic money tree, my backside. You know, Tories will Tory, but this budget is probably the worst thing to have happened to the UK and especially to Scotland. It probably outdoes even Thatcher in its very sweeping, drastic moves. It's nothing but bad news. What you're going to see, obviously, is tax cuts for the very richest, you know, the cream of the crop, if you like. And on the ground, we've got all this talk about people having to work for benefits. People that are in part-time work are going to be told that their benefits that make them up to the, in inverted commas, poverty level will be reduced because they're expected to work longer hours. There's talk of targeting the over 50s particularly, as if they should be working harder than they already are. I mean, people are just absolutely scunnered with this. You see it right across various different parts of England, especially the Red Wall area, and in Scotland, as evidenced by last night's Wee Alba book meeting in Dalkeith. Folk have had enough. You know, some folk are hungry, some folk are worrying about paying bills, others are concerned to see inflation rising, the mortgage interest rates slowly creeping up, it's only going one way, this is going to be a hell of a winter. Discontent doesn't even come close. In Kwasi Kwarteng, doesn't give two hoots. He's all right, Jack, as are those around him. And what have we got? Trussonomics, exporting Yorkshire tea, pork markets, jam and muffins, and there she is in a wee deluded bubble, while the rest of the country, in effect, she might as well have told them to eat cake, because that's the kind of performance that you're getting. So God help us, if this doesn't drive Scots towards independence quicker than anything you've ever seen before, then we're not too wee, we're not too poor, but as I've said before, we will have proven once again that we're too stupid to get ourselves out of this hike that somebody else has made for us.
It is, as Eva says, Yvonne, it's just pure Toryism that we've seen. I mean, the first thing they did was lift the bonus on the banker's bonus so they could earn even more, go back to obscene money that caused all the problems in the first place. And when questioned about it, they said, yeah, well, it's to encourage people to come and work here. So she's trying to encourage more millionaires, billionaires and bankers in, while sacrificing the people at the bottom of the heap who need the most help. That is Toryism in its absolute purest form.
Well, it's there for all to see. And some of the people who are screaming loudest are the ones who voted Tory. And, you know, what on earth do they expect? You know, Tory voters are like sun readers. We know they're out there. No one wants to admit it, but they are out there, and they are responsible for the carnage, which is due to kick in the winter. Sorry, I'm coughing.
The fact is that the other one she's done, she's lifted the stamp duty. Now, one of the problems surely we found out in 2008 crash, Yvonne, is that, you know, getting the property market heating up again is the last thing in the middle of a recession that we are needing right now, is to create another false bubble. But again, it's only the people at the top of the tree who are going to be able to afford these houses.
Absolutely. You know, this was a budget for the rich. There is no consideration for the millions who are really dreading the winter, who can't pay their energy bills, who can't put food on the table, who do have that stark choice, eat or heat. In some households, there isn't even that choice. There's no food, there's no heating. While the Tory rich are laughing all the way to the bank, the reality is that the majority of Britons are having to go to the food bank. That's the only bank that exists for them. And it's really shocking. As Eva said, if this doesn't make people realise, in those of us living in Scotland, that independence is the answer for us, is the solution for us, then I don't know what will. And the sad thing is, we should be in well in advanced plans now for a referendum for next year. And while I see all sorts of movements and preparing for this, I see very little activity coming out of Holyrood. This is a time when the Scottish government should be really at the starting blocks and talking about independence.
No, well, actually been going on for a while, and it hasn't. People live on there with the dreaded lurgy. Not so good. You need a wee half a whiskey, a wee hot toddy, and you'll be fine. Eva, the other thing is, I read some great articles in the last couple of days, and one of them is that the speculators, the people who've done very well out of this, the hedge fund managers and the bankers boys, they're now shorting the pound to drive down the pound, which will in itself will lead to a fire sale of UK PLC, and they'll be buying up medium-sized companies and small companies and repossessing houses, and they'll be increasing their wealth even more, and they'll be given a tax cut to do it. And then in a couple of years, there'll be a wee bit of growth because they'll have bought these companies cheap and be able to trade a wee bit. And they'll say, see, it worked. Trickle down works. It's all a con. It's all smoke and mirrors. And it's the poorest in our society who are going to pay the price of these smoke and mirrors.
Well, you see it happening already, Roddy, in part as the result of Brexit and partly as the result of the pandemic. The high streets across the UK are decimated. I mean, my local county town is Alloa, and you can't move now for empty shops, boarded up shops, for sale signs, to let signs, and those shops that are still occupied are primarily betting shops, takeaways, charity shops. The big shops are going, the wee ones are dying off. The sole traders are struggling, folk are living hand to mouth in some places. And of course, the Tories are laughing all the way to the bank. Absolutely unbelievable that we've got to this. I mean, the 70s were bad enough. The 80s with Thatcher was horrific. This is going to be far, far worse. It's brutal, and an awful lot of people are going to suffer. And, the Scottish Government's reaction to this is to whine and moan, when actually they must realise they're caught in a cleft stick, because we've already got the Scottish Tories shouting about how Scotland's going to be the highest taxed part of the United Kingdom, and how Nicola Sturgeon should be doing something about reducing the tax rates in Scotland. Now, heads she loses, and tails she loses as well, because she can't win. This is the price of the union. It's the union dividend. And everything that's coming home to roost now is coming home to roost and to shaft the Scots daily, simply because of inaction on independence. That referendum bill that was drafted and presented to the Scottish Parliament in March 2021, before the last Scottish parliamentary election, should have been passed by Holyrood. We could have had a referendum by now. We could have been negotiating the terms of independence now. We could have been talking about a national energy company. We could have been injecting money into the Scottish economy. We could have been looking after our people. Instead, we've got hand-wringing and whining about cuts to benefits and, what is the threshold for income tax? How are people going to survive? Where can we find more money from when we've got a limited fixed budget? You know, a whole load of greeting and crocodile tears from people who were elected to get us out of this slaughterhouse that the UK is rapidly evolving into. So, Nicola, if you're watching, get the finger out. Time is not on your side. And if you're not going to get the job done, get out the road for those of us who will.
Here. We will come on to that for sure. The other thing is that a couple of months ago, Yvonne, we were chatting on here, all of us, about the Freeports and how it was getting sold as this great thing and it was going to bring jobs and new this, that, and the next thing. And we managed to just say, no, it's not. It's a way for employers to get in and ignore planning and this, that, and the next thing. But now the next one they're talking about, or we're just talking about it, is charter cities. And for the people listening, what that means is that corporations will take over the running of your city or your region, and they will be in charge of all the rules, whether that be for your employment rights, your holiday rights, your hours of working, everything, how much you're going to pay in council tax and what services you'll get. It is going to happen if the Tories are allowed to get away with it, Yvonne. It is scary, beyond scary.
Well, Aberdeen Council is begging to become a free port. They're running towards Westminster, asking for free port status. You know, it's like watching turkeys running towards Christmas and with flags waving. It's absolute madness. And we're right at a crossroads at the moment in Scotland, and we should be advancing, and there should only be one subject on the agenda, and that's independence. And instead, we seem to be making retrograde steps. And I just can't emphasize enough to people living here the contempt that Westminster has for north of the border. And if you wanted to see an example of that contempt, it was, I hate to go back to it, but back to the mini budget. And it was the opposition parties voiced their concerns about the budget. Labour's got up, and when the SNP got up, Liz Truss walked out. That's the contempt with which Westminster holds the people of Scotland. So don't, Aberdeen, don't go with a begging bowl to Westminster for help, because that they will absolutely crush you. It's just so frustrating.
It's the problem with Aberdeen Council is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's a Labour-Tory coalition. So, housejokeforus.com.
Labour-Tory, coalition. What is that? It sounds like something from a political Frankenstein table.
Well, I think I prefer to put it into the Scottish context. It's just two cheeks of the one arse. And that's exactly what it is. It's all about the union. They're unionists. They're not neither socialist or capitalist. They're unionists, and that's their credo, and everything is round that. And they will do anything that the government in Mother England tells them to do. But the other thing, moving on this, because one of the great, this stems from Brexit, Eva. But there was Liz Truss, who I wrote a tweet before she became Prime Minister and said, not long, a couple of months from now, people were saying, well, maybe Boris wasn't so bad. I'm telling you that's going to happen. But she toddled off to America to get this trade deal signed, tell the colonials in America what's what. And I think this is an absolute perfect metaphor for the Tory party in the UK. I want to get his name right. Where is he? Truss's chief of staff couldn't travel to the USA because he's under an FBI investigation for bribery, corruption, and attempted subversion of democracy. And I repeat, This is Liz Truss's chief of staff, and he couldn't travel. And when she got to America, oh, we'll come on to that after you've answered this one, she got the biggest snub of all. But is that not the epitome of how bad it is when that's her chief of staff?
Well, they're nothing but crooks, vagabonds, footpads, thieves. You know, they're even worse than, remember Alan Bastard, the New Statesman, Rick Mail. We thought that was a joke. We thought it was funny, but the reality is actually far, far worse.
That's a training manual now.
Exactly. You saw, you know, in the days of Boris Johnson, his pals making multi-million-pound deals with our money, taxpayers' money, on PPE that didn't appear, track and trace that didn't work, you know, innumerable scams in 2020 and 2021. They're so bloody barefaced now, they're not giving a toss what the public thinks. They're in it for themselves and they're up to their neck in mire and dirt. And they couldn't care less what anybody thinks about them, because all they're there for is to line their pockets and the pockets of their pals. I'm going to say I never thought I'd see the day, but we knew that we would. We knew that it would get a lot worse. You know, honesty and integrity and decency and principle in public life in the UK now has gone right down the river. Scotland's got to get out. You know, do you remember the Londoner, the taxi guy who made loads of videos prior to the 2014 referendum, and he used to shout to his camera, "Run, Scotland, run! Run for your lives!" It was right. We've got to get out of this place now. There's nothing, no decency left there, nothing at all.
No, and the big, all through Brexit and everything else, there's this pomposity, you know, now we'll hold all the cards, Yvonne, and we'll be making trade deals like every day. I mean, I think Liam Fox was asking for a special boat so he could tour the world signing up trade deals. And of course, America, our special relationship with America, I mean, the Americans really would rather be us. They envy us so much, and the Queen was their Queen, and blah, blah, blah. So we've come to sign our trade deal. You're not getting one. Beat it, Limey. And they were warned. I remember watching Nancy Pelosi about 2 years ago and said, you mess with Ireland, you're messing with the American Congress, and you will not get. But with a pomposity and arrogance, well, it's only the Irish. Just, you know, they're jocos with a different accent. And they got a right good slap in the coupon. They didn't see it coming. We did.
I know it's incredible that they didn't, but this is the arrogance of this government, the previous government, and well, you know, 12 years of the Tories, and I don't know what's more frustrating, their stupidity when it comes to the special relationship. Because, as you say, there isn't a special relationship. You know, if it just doesn't exist, it always has been fairly one-sided. But
not even fairly one-sided. It's been one-sided the whole time. I mean, the thing is here, Yvonne, Ireland is the only country in Europe where if you're flying to America, you can clear immigration in Dublin Airport or Shannon Airport. It's the only, not in Heathrow, not in Gatwick, and you're messing with Ireland. Yeah, come on, boys, you know, use a bit of the bonds.
Yeah, well, you know, the colonial legacy and the brutalization of the Irish over the centuries is coming back to haunt. Because, you know, you can't swing a cat in America without hitting somebody of Irish descent. You can't get an American president without finding Irish genes in there somewhere. Yeah. And, you know, the special relationship isn't London and Washington. It's Washington and Dublin, Washington and Belfast. That's where the special relationship is. And
I mean,
So
Chicago River and St. Patrick's Day, they turn it green. A tip for a clue, London. A tip for a clue.
yeah, well, it's quite clear that there'll be no trade deal with America until they sort out the Irish solution. And of course, the solution is a united Ireland.
Here, here. Try and come soon enough. And it'll happen. That's terrible. You've got to do something about that cough. But it goes on. There's two things I want to go into, Eva, on all linked into the budget and money and everything else. One of the other things that Liz Truss did was to immediately issue 100 new drilling licenses in the North Sea. But what I loved was the way BBC Scotland, I don't know why they put the Scotland in the BBC, but who said this was the UK government managing the decline in oil. Now, I didn't know there was an election pending, did you?
Is that oil that's been running?
Well, yes, running out. It's the wrong type oil. It's too volatile.
It's amazing that the oil runs out every time there's an election coming or a referendum or something, and as soon as it's over, and we were stupid enough to vote against it.
Yeah, it becomes a British asset. But here's the one I really want to talk about.
It's hard to get out. It's too dear. You're not needing it. Right. We need to think about saving the planet, you know. Where's their oil fund? Where's their wind fund? And then there's the water. You know, water's going to be the new oil. It's not even unbelievable anymore. It's par for the course. You could have written the script yourself, Roddy.
It's the gullibility of the people. That's the most annoying thing.
It's the fool me once, etc. I just think the Scottish people have woken up this time. You know, I think so. 2014 was a dress rehearsal. And we gave them another chance, I suppose. We listened to the vow. Some folk were taken in by the vow. You know, I don't know if you saw it yesterday, but Gordon Brown has produced a paper that Keir Starmer and his friends in the Labour leadership have read. It's not been released fully yet, but Gordon Brown's paper to save the union, Flash Gordon to the rescue once more. What he said in his paper was that when Labour are elected to create the next government of the UK, deluded, but when they're elected, he says they're going to abolish the House of Lords.
Well, that's radical. They never said that before, did they?
I've been hearing that for 100 years. So he's going to abolish the House of Lords, and they're going to look at devolving some economic powers to the devolved countries, because that's going to strengthen the union. You know, ever so slowly, Gordon Brown and the people around him are realising they shot both their feet off when they signed the vow and, you know, kept Scotland in the union. So Gordon Brown's writing made interesting reading, but it didn't make my blood boil as much as the other stuff I read last night, which was from the pen of the mighty Robin McAlpine, who was angry at the, you know, probably the most enraged that I've ever seen. You could feel the red mist coming up off the computer screen as I read it. And what he was angry about was poverty in Scotland. And, you know, poverty amidst plenty, hungry bairns, malnourished children in hospital, you know, children hospitalised in Scotland as the result of the impact of sustained hunger, malnutrition in Scotland in the 21st century. And his rage came in part from Tory policies, but it also came from his understanding that in 2015, Alec Neil, the SNP minister for, I think, what we would probably call social welfare and the like at the time, presented the First Minister, Miss Sturgeon, with a plan which would have reduced child poverty in Scotland by half within 5 years. She didn't even read it, and within an hour of it being presented, the First Minister, Miss Sturgeon, put the red pen through it and refused to consider that plan. So, you know, what you've got in Scotland today is the Tories and their robbing from the poor to give to the rich budget, coupled with a Scottish government that's far too scared to take the radical transformational action that Scotland so very desperately needs So, the Scottish people have got to not take no for an answer from the Tories, and they've got to get the SNP government told. The good people in the SNP grassroots have to tell the government on a daily basis, enough is enough. We can't have any more of this. Scotland deserves so much better. Let's use the oil and the gas and the wind and the water and the whiskey and the forestry and the fishing and the income from tourism and all the great things that we can do in Scotland. We built the world. Let's use all of that to our very best of our abilities and do what we can to make this country not just independent but flourish. You're talking about Ireland there. Mary Lou MacDonald and Michelle O'Neill do a good job of using and publicising the diaspora. That's what Scotland needs to do, and did very, very well when Alex Salmond was at the helm. Tartan Day, the 6th of April, etc. The Scottish government should be speaking to the Americans daily about what they can do to help Scotland and listen to the Scottish voice. There was a young American guy last night at the Wialba book event in Dalkeith. He's a student and he's over here. He's been to Wales, up in Scotland this week, and he's looking at the yes movements in both countries, because he says they really are not reported on in the States at all at the moment, other than to refer to Braveheart and the nutters that paint their faces blue. It's a bit of a joke, really. So he was interested to hear that there's a proper democratic, peaceful, peaceable, hopefully revolution underway and on the cards in Scotland, and it's that sort of publicity that we're needing, and worldwide now, without delay.
Yvonne, Eva touched on there about the social policy that Alec Neil wrote up, and Nicola just discounted it. And I've said a few times that Nicola does love a bandwagon. We've seen this thing in the Highlanders umbrella in Glasgow, where the people are going undercover to get fed. The kids, you're seeing kids at night going for a feed, and they've been pleading for premises and a bit of help, and it's not coming. But yesterday, the First Minister announced that for the Ukrainian refugees, and it's a worthwhile cause, I have no problem with that, she's found 50 million quid to refurbish houses that have been unlettable and unsuitable, but they're going to spend 15 million to make them habitable for Ukrainian refugees. Now, I don't want to sound like one of these home counties right-wing Brexiteers, but we've had Scottish people on the streets homeless. Why wasn't this 50 million spent before to house our homeless and to find a place for the people who are feeding the hungry? It just seems she's found a bandwagon. She's not interested in this social care, but here's something that will get a headline and make me look good and get me some brownie points for the UN. It's quite disgusting.
Well, yes, it is. It's very opportunistic. I mean, I welcome anything that will alleviate the pain and suffering of refugees. And Nicola Sturgeon is doing well by the white refugees. But what about the refugees of colour in Scotland? What about the refugees from Africa, Asia, the Arab world, who are living in rancid conditions with mold and slime on walls, with no heating, appalling conditions. And as you say, there's also the homeless in Scotland as well. It's like she's building up a caste system which places white refugees at the top and black refugees at the bottom. And it's there for all to see.
Yeah. But where's the Scottish homeless in all this?
And her own people, the Scottish people, are right at below basement level. It really is disgusting.
Yeah.
She looks at people through a lens of colour, and that's racism. There's no other word for it. And what it is building up resentment to a whole innocent body of people, the Ukrainian refugees, because
I don't think she's a racist, and I don't think she does. I think it's, I go back to, she's a bandwagon jumper.
No, I'm not saying that she's
how will I
racist.
look the best?
That is the lens. That is, you know, the lens of racism. That's what that's what it amounts to. I mean, I have done quite a bit of work with refugees in Scotland, and the treatment of refugees from Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan in Scotland is quite different to the treatment of Ukrainian refugees.
Well, that's shocking. We discussed it and what we're about. We're all about independence, Eva. And yesterday you were, as you've alluded, in Dalkeith, and I saw a wee clip. I'm just going to get Techie to play it in a second, because we need to move. We agree we need independence, because all these things we've discussed are what's the problems that we are suffering. Here's the cure. And I've often said to my children from day one, everything in life is simple. It's people that make it complicated. And Alex Salmond yesterday was at his most magnificent best, and he simplified it into simple English, simple steps. This, ladies and gentlemen, is how easy it is for us to gain our independence. Techie, can you stick up Alex Salmond clip, please?
But basically, the bones of his strategy to obtain independence from the position we're in would be as follows. That is the parliamentary intervention day after day after day that I spoke about. Secondly, you have to appeal to the international bodies that you're speaking about. You have to enunciate your appeal to the Strasbourg Court, to the United Nations, to demand observance with the Helsinki Accords. This idea, incidentally, that the parent country has the right of veto over self-determination, that's been dealt with so many times, but nowhere better than the UK's own legal opinion, the United Kingdom's legal case about Kosovo, where they demolished that argument. If it was up to the Soviet Union, where the Baltic states would be independent, then nobody would ever be independent. It's a nonsense. And thirdly, popular agitation. You're nowhere without popular support. You have to demonstrate the political popular will. Now, these are the ingredients that take you into the position that a Scottish government should demand the mandate to negotiate independence from Westminster. But, you know, there's one vital ingredient without which none of this ever comes to anything, and that is political will. You have to have the will to do it.
Simplicity. Life is simple. People make it complicated, Yvonne. Alec there showed a simple, straightforward, 5-step way to move forward. Our Scottish government for 8 years has been standing like a deer in the headlights without a clue. There's the steps. Will they listen?
Well, this is why he will, always be regarded as a great statesman, because it doesn't matter what has gone on in his life and all the political highs and lows that he's experienced, he's never taken his finger off the pulse of what is happening on the street, what is happening to ordinary people, what is, this ability that he has to hit the spot is quite remarkable. And Nicola Sturgeon would do well to remember the days of her mentor, because she has been allowed to drift and lose touch with reality. I don't know who's advising her at these days, but she just seems to be in some sort of bubble that has no bearing to the reality of what is happening on the ground in Scotland today, or how to get out of the problems that are facing ordinary people living in Scotland today.
But there you are. But Eva, Alex given her the solution. And I'm sure he wouldn't mind her stealing it, plagiarising it. Just do it. And the first thing to do is, when Nicola should get hold of her MPs, all of them, and say, listen, when you get down there, disrupt. Nothing will annoy the English Unionists more than these pesky Scots being, upsetting their parliament, interrupting, being awkward. There you are, there's step one. Nicola should do that tomorrow. Nothing stopping her.
You see, the thing is, as Yvonne quite rightly said, Alex Salmond is a man of principle, and nobody on the planet has ever questioned his determination to see Scottish independence. It's like a stick at Edinburgh Rock. The notion of independence runs right through every fibre of Alex's being. Nobody has questioned that commitment. There is no reason to question the commitment because he's a man of principle. But we are unable to say the same about the current leadership of the SNP because we're not seeing action of the type that we need to see from a party who's supposed to be serious about delivering the electoral promise and keeping the promise that they made to the people who elected them. I voted SNP all my life. I voted SNP earlier this year in the local authority elections after I voted for myself. I voted SNP last year in the Scottish parliamentary election, and I helped to elect or re-elect Keith Brown as my MSP. I helped to elect John Nicholson as my MP. Those are mistakes I may not repeat. But the horrible fact of the matter is that at the moment, the SNP are waiting for the Supreme Court to make a decision which is unlikely to go their way, and they're sitting on their hands whilst they await that hearing and that decision. They've got all their eggs in one basket just now, when what they ought to be doing is delivering on their commitments. January 2020, Nicola Sturgeon said she would convene a constitutional convention. That is a promise that she made. There is no reason for her not to fulfil that today. She can call all her MPs, MSPs, councillors, the whole lot of them, into Edinburgh next week. There's absolutely no argument against that. They were mandated to get independence. They're only doing their job if they meet to talk about how to achieve it. You know, what they're not going to get for Scotland is any kind of return by sitting meekly in Westminster and popping up and down every now and again to say, Scotland will not be dragged out of the EU. Well, by the way, pals, we're gone. Or on the side of a bus, stop Brexit. We've no right to stop Brexit for England. England voted overwhelmingly for Brexit. That's their problem. Let them get on with it. What we need to do is focus on what's best for Scotland. And so what Nicola ought to be doing is A, constitutional convention, B, instructing her MPs regularly every single time that they're sitting in Westminster. One of them needs to stand up and bring the house down and walk out. And there's about 50 of them. They can all take turns doing it, and they can do it every day and bring the place to a standstill. But you know what's wrong? Westminster, and the Tories in particular, and Keir Starmer and the Labour Party too, and the Liberal Democrats, they do not fear the SNP leadership. They fear only the people of Scotland, and it's the people of Scotland who need to tell the SNP leadership to do their job, do what they were elected to do, and that is deliver independence, at the soonest, earliest opportunity. No more of this cooperating, kowtowing, settling down there in Westminster. They bring it on themselves. Pete Wishart's moaning about how Alba are full of hate. Alba's not full of hate. Alba's determined to see action. And people refer to the gravy trainers and this sort of thing because they don't see action from the SNP. They hear mealy-mouthed words repeated often that are absolutely meaningless. And, the SNP, quite frankly, at Westminster have become a laughing stock, and they've done that all by themselves. So, if other MPs are laughing at them in Westminster, how frustrated do they think the people of Scotland who elected them feel when they watch being laughed at and jeered and booed and the Prime Minister, leaves the room as soon as Ian Blackford or one of his colleagues stands up. It's utter contempt and ridicule, and they deserve it because they're not standing up for Scotland, which is what they said they would do.
Yeah, we've seen this before so often. The thing is, when the last day of the Scottish Parliament before the recess came on, Nicola Sturgeon made her speech about sending everything off to the Supreme Court, and we would have a referendum next October 19th. And then they all went on holiday, as Eve has alluded to, and it was the salvos and the SSRGs and the Alba Blue Book, the Alba Book, and dare I say Prism and other things, and Tweet Street. They were the ones campaigning, and this lot, as I say, we're not doing it. There's two things in Alex' wee chat there. He said two things. You need popular support. Well, we know, we were discussing it, we saw it in Coatbridge. Eva was referring to it in Dalkeith and wherever she goes. You've seen it when you've been out on the streets. The support's there. It needs the one vital ingredient, the last one he mentioned, political will. And all it would take is the political will of Nicola Sturgeon, her leadership, to say, let's go, boys and girls. And it would go. It would be like 2014 all over again. Am I right?
Absolutely. But, it's yes, there's a summer recess. The SNP do seem to have gone on holiday, but that wouldn't stop them from going on marches.
No.
Now, can anyone tell me when Nicola Sturgeon last attended an independence march, last spoke at an independence march, last stood on the platform of an independence march? We should be hearing about the big event on October the 8th. She should be topping the bill.
Yes.
I don't know if any SNP politicians are actually speaking in George Square on October the 8th. There's another big event on October the 1st. She should be topping the bill. She should be on every independent platform.
She should.
And she's conspicuous by her absence.
Yeah.
She
won't be in the 8th.
opening of an envelope if it's to do with the United Nations, NATO, anything.
Climate change.
A royal appointment. But independence, here's a question for all Prism listeners. When was the last time Nicola Sturgeon stood on an independence platform at a rally organised by independent-minded people?
Oh.
When?
I was going to answer you by independent-minded people. No, never, ever. As to when she stood on the National, did an event in George Square, which was it was more of an election rally for her than anything else. And that she did a 20-minute stint, made a few I can announce today's, and left the building. So it's the answer to your question. I don't know what we do without the political will, how we force them. Have you got any ideas, Eva? How do we force them?
Well, I think they have to be embarrassed into it, but even that, I doubt very much whether that'll work. You've got the SNP agenda for the conference. I think that's been released, and Ian Lawson was running some articles about it. They're probably beyond redemption, quite frankly. They've told often enough what they need to do. Alex shown them the way repeatedly, and all that we've got is this waiting for the Supreme Court decision. You and I know the Supreme Court's not going to go in their favour. So it remains to be seen whether that referendum in October next year will take place or not. What needs to be happening between now and then, though, is the action that we're speaking about. And, Yvonne's perfectly correct when she asks, where are the SNP speakers? There's all under one banner rally and march in Edinburgh next week. The following week is Yestival. Yestival is now coinciding or clashing with the SNP conference, which is on that weekend. The Alba conference is the following weekend. But there is absolutely no reason why SNP MPs, MSPs, councillors, members, activists shouldn't be attending all these marches and rallies and speaking at them. You know, every single SNP MP and MSP was elected to achieve independence. If they are not speaking and marching at these events, there's something very far wrong, and their electorate needs to ask them what it is. You know, these are big, united events that are about bringing the entire Yes movement together, because independence is bigger than any individual and bigger than any party. It is about the future of our country. It is about the destiny and the destination of Scots who are here now and Scots as yet unborn. And if party allegiance or instructions from Bute House or from whoever it is that's pulling the strings behind, like the Wizard of Oz, if those instructions are that folk have to stay at home and not come out and fight for the very thing that they were elected to achieve, then by goodness, Winnie Ewing would have a hell of a hard time, you know, with a shiver running round the benches of Holyrood or the SNP benches in the House of Commons looking for a spine. You know, the only spines that are there in the independence movement in the Commons belong to Neil Hanvey and Kenny McCaskill. The most popular event in relation to the independence cause that has happened this year, and which is mentioned at every independence gathering that I'm at, is Kenny and Neil's walkout. And the question that always follows is, what in the name of the wee man was Ian Blackford and all those around him, what were they thinking about that they sat there on their hands, jeering and laughing, when they should have got up and followed Neil and Kenny out the door? That's what the people of Scotland expected them to do. That's what they still can do. Every single time that they're down there, that's what they should be doing. When they don't do it, they provide the evidence leading to the conclusion that they are in it for themselves and they're just too fierce and too compliant to do the job that they were elected to do and for which they are paid handsomely.
Yeah. What you're saying, what were they thinking? Well, I'm led to believe they were thinking that there was a special quail on in the Westminster restaurant that night, and that was something for them to look forward to, and a very cheap Beaujolais, and all those lovely expenses and their pensions, and but they certainly weren't thinking about independence, Yvonne. And it's time that we gave them a reminder. They work for us, we don't work for them.
Well, they really seem to be beyond shame. I'm just thinking recently there was a landmark case where the LGB Alliance were forced to back up their charity status after the trans charity Mermaids accused them of being a hate group. And it saw John Nicholson give evidence on behalf of Mermaids to say that the LGB Alliance should not have charitable status. How an MP became embroiled in a nasty row like this between two charities is questionable anyway. But he gave evidence at this hearing and was asked if he had read a report about the situation, and he was giving evidence not having read this report. It was called the Cass Review, that undermined many of the arguments used to support the controversial trans healthcare, which has been offered to children and young people. And he was giving evidence and hadn't even read this crucial report, which was at the heart of the case. And it was it was just really, I felt embarrassed for him. But this is symptomatic of the arrogance of the SNP MPs. They say one thing, when you question them about it, they've got no substance to back up their argument, or they're uninformed, or haven't even bothered to read the reports at their fingertips to back up or substantiate arguments. It's really, it makes me wonder, what the hell are they doing in Westminster?
Having a ball, having a great time. That's what they're doing, having a great time. Eva, we've run out of time, but as our equality officer, would you like to add anything about Mr. Nicholson and the mermaid case?
Yeah, the quotation from John Nicholson that hit the headlines, I had to go and double check because it was so very baffling and quite honestly cringeworthy. But what the man actually said in his evidence was that a lesbian is someone who declares themselves so to be. And in essence, what he was saying was that a man, a male, a person of the male sex, is allowed to call himself a lesbian. Have you ever heard anything so utterly, ridiculously pathetic?
It's unhinged.
That's what it is. Unhinged, absolutely unhinged. And the mission creep that you've got here from these people is that they keep talking about gender and gender identity, which they cannot define. And the Equality Act of 2010 narrates what are called the protected characteristics, to do with discrimination, etc. And one of those is sex, and another one is gender reassignment. Gender or gender identity are not protected characteristics, no matter how much Stonewall or John Nicholson or any of his friends might wish them to be. So, Yvonne and I, as women, are entitled to single-sex spaces and single-sex rights. If John Nicholson had his way, we would lose that, because men who self-identify as women would arguably be entitled to invade these spaces. So you could have a ridiculous situation where a trans-identified male who says he's female, although he's not, could become a carer for female patients and have access to female services. It's absolutely unacceptable. But that's the kind of hell that John Nicholson and others have in store if they get their way. They're deranged and they're dangerous. And what they need to do is get back to the day job of achieving independence and leave all the other stuff very much on the sidelines where it belongs at the moment.
It's not a joking matter, and I didn't mean to be too frivolous, but it is so idiotic, so ridiculous, so stupid. It's it's like the one, the Flat Earth Society with offices all around the globe. It is that stupid. I think in decades to come, people look back and go, how the hell did that thing keep going for so long? Anyway, as I said, unfortunately, ladies, the clock has beaten us, and we managed it without Phil. No angry Phil this week, folks. I'm sorry. But just a few bits of housekeeping before we go. You've asked us to do a roadshow after the success of Coatbridge, and we are willing to do that, folks. We're making some steps, but you have to help us, because it's not easy to pull together. We need venues, we need people to offer to do it and set it all up, and we turn up and we will do our thing. We're going to be hopefully doing one at the Alapa conference. We're looking to set that up, where we will have an event and record a show up there. So give us your suggestions. Let us hear where you'd like us to go. I've been told a few people they would like me to go, but that's another story for another day. Until myself and my dear friends here see you again, please, please, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.